Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Midday Western U.S. Regional Forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, the National Weather Service put out an interesting graphic that kind of explains what we've seen when you compare the difference between February of 2019 and February 2020. Some numbers over there on the right are quite striking. The average precipitation for the whole state a year ago was almost 9 inches, and this year it's just a shade over 0.2 of an inch. And what I really liked is to see these huge numbers. I always think it's fun to think about them in this context. When you look at it, last year we had over 25 trillion more gallons of rain that fell across the state of California than we did in February 2020. And that's an exceptional number, and it's quite critical as we start to understand what the impacts of this very, very dry February have been. Now, when I looked through some of the details, some of the things that we've done is not only have we had a major deficit in precipitation, but look at what our humidity anomalies look like. So throughout much of the state, we've averaged between about 10 to 20% below normal on humidity. And so therefore, it was automatically drier in the lower atmosphere, which is going to promote higher evapotranspiration rates. And when we add that to the fact we had pretty strong winds, especially some of these winds coming from the north, the northeast, and at times even from the east, which we of course call Santa Ana winds, we had a very problematic February in that not only were we not getting the precipitation from above, but we were rapidly evaporating what we had in the soil anyway. And so you can see here the influence. So you've been staring at this image for a few minutes. This is looking at anomalous winds for the month of February. So you can kind of trace out the flow path of these winds here, doing something a bit like this at times. So that blocking ridge that we talked about, those big high pressure cells that were sitting right here, that's what they ended up doing overall to the flow of the atmosphere, causing the problems that we have been seeing in California. Well, I can talk about it this way because as we've been discussing now for a few weeks, the pattern is about to change in a big way, and you're going to see that change right here where I just put the X through on the image. Before we get there, though, I just want to talk about winds today. We have very, very strong winds coming through parts of Montana out into the high plains here in Montana. Strong winds that are also offshore, including some high wind advisories still down here in parts of Southern California, really around the LA basin, getting over toward San Diego. But when we look at this on the whole, let's just take a look at what those winds look like. The strongest winds, Santa Ana type winds coming in down here, strong offshore winds, and the winds that you see coming down slope here off of the Rocky Mountains into parts of Montana will be at times sustained at 30 to 40 miles an hour, gusting much higher. But these downslope winds are often warm because they adiabatically compress. In other words, the air descends the backside of the mountains, and as it descends, you get what's called adiabatic compression. So it's a warming process. So temperatures inside this area today might be up to 20 degrees warmer than average due to this westerly wind, but strong. Just to show you that it's not going to be doing much in this area, we can see that same region is having the strong winds. We don't have much snow. So when I say not doing much, we're not going to be melting any of the snow in this area. In fact, outside of this stretch into the Rockies here and in the Cascades, much of the United States is kind of in a bit of a snow deficit. Even though the stuff you see up here is not deep snowpack for this time of year, we will be changing the numbers that you see over here in the Sierra Nevada, though, in this forecast. Just you'll see here in a few minutes the pattern as it slowly starts to evolve. Now, in the meantime, we're still dealing with flow that's got this cutoff feature that's sitting here over parts of the Baja and into Mexico. So high pressure cell sitting here in the upper levels of the atmosphere. The flow is going around that cutoff low, which is sitting and spinning right in through here. And as a result, we're going to have a relatively drier week as a result of this flow in California, with more of our precipitation coming into the northwest. But that will all be changing very quickly after this. So if we just take a step back and look here at the next 5 days, so this gets us out to Sunday morning at total accumulated precipitation, we can see the influence of that high pressure cell I just mentioned, and the fact that British Columbia into coastal Washington and parts of Oregon, best chances at getting precipitation. Now overall, this view here is drier than normal, with the exception of right up in this corridor here, but still this is a relatively drier pattern for this particular time period in March. Okay, so from here, take a look at this. This is now the next 5 days, and we see something we have not seen in a very long time. You can almost see it in the trajectory of the precipitation totals here. See how the flow's coming in like this? Well, that is the big change that we've been talking about happening here in the Pacific Ocean. And while the Northwest gets a drier time period as the flow stops coming out of the Northwest and shifts now to be coming out of the southwest. Still, we're thankful that we did bring up precipitation amounts earlier in this year after a very dry start to our winter in parts of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Okay, with that, let's get into some of the details here. Now, I want to show you the overall picture first. It's very critical to watch two pieces. One is this ridge that you see right in through here, and two, watch the extension come out of this trough as I forward you through the next several days here. So getting through midweek, this is now Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon and evening, getting into Friday. We saw our ridge retreat over toward the Aleutian Islands. We now see a trough developing here, initially coming through parts of British Columbia, and this is going to swing in some cooler and unsettled weather into the northwest to end the week. You'll see it in a few moments, but overall, watch what the pattern does. There it is. So if I just rock back and forth from Saturday the 7th through the 8th and 9th, if I go back and forth, we see this broader piece of the trough break off and set up right here. Now the flow of the atmosphere, just follow the cursor, goes around this ridge, that's the high, around the low, that is the low, so this is a high over low pattern, and now the flow comes out right here. So the problem with the northwest going over to drier in week 2 is because the flow is coming in this direction. It's no longer targeting the northwest. It has to come back out and go around this cutoff low. Well, it's not really cut off, but this closed low here. As we keep moving forward, we go out to the 10th, 11th, 12th. We see that that feature doesn't disappear. We continue to see it showing up, and as a consequence of that, it looks as though the first few weeks of March here, well, really starting after the 7th, but from the 7th to the 15th, 16th, we are going to be getting the right kind of flow coming out of the Central Pacific to really increase our precipitation amounts in California and Nevada. Meanwhile, that's all made possible by this ridge going back here over toward the Aleutian Islands. All right, so that gets you out 2 weeks. Let's now see what this looks like by looking at the operational model run. Now to start, it's the same old, okay? Your cutoff low is down here. It's missed California for the most part, but the cutoff low is sitting there, and there's that big area of high pressure, so systems are going around the periphery. But if you don't mind, I'm just going to play this for you. Just watch it all kind of unfold here. Ready? There it is. You now see the major change in the pattern, and let's go back and look at some of the details. So getting us into this afternoon and this evening on Tuesday, getting into the overnight hours, we still are dealing with the flow primarily coming in this direction around that high. So it's coastal Washington and some snow here in the northern Rockies. That's all we're talking about. As we progress into Thursday, and Thursday morning and afternoon, this is the time when the deeper trough develops here. So it targets British Columbia initially, but the leading front is going to hit parts of the northwest by the time we get into Thursday evening and into Friday morning. Now at this point on Friday, March the 6th, look at where our high pressure cell is. Look at the trough digging in here, bringing in the unsettled weather. And now we can see moisture transport coming all the way from this direction. So ready? This is Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening. Getting into Saturday morning here. Now look at the difference. By the time we get into Saturday morning, we've now brought snow here into the higher elevations in Northern California, rain at the lower elevations. We've got snow and rain moving through parts of Oregon and Washington, and we now have a deep low sitting right out here, building into that trough that we saw diving down, beginning all the way back to this Thursday, but then really manifesting itself by Saturday afternoon. So what that does is through the weekend, start to develop here by Sunday afternoon and evening, getting into Monday morning, and now with a low sitting and spinning in this area with a high way off over here, this is what it's going to take to finally start to just crank up precipitation amounts a week from today in California. Now because of that, the systems are ejecting into Alaska, and now they're coming around this cutoff low, and you can see throughout much of next week, so this is starting on Monday but going through Thursday and into Friday, we're just going to be pounding California with precipitation here, what they've desperately needed for so very long. Okay, week 2. Let's only look at week 2 now. So this is going to be basically the 10th of March through the 17th. And we see that pattern has adjusted over toward drier than normal in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and much wetter than average by a ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch, some locations well over 2 inches here, down in parts of California, moving into Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. So that's the change. That is the big difference maker that we've been discussing. It is now coming into fruition here in the second week of March. Now, what is it doing to temperatures. Well, today things are quite warm here in Northern California and in the Columbia Basin. And you can also see here with the downslope flows coming into Montana, the 15 to 20 degrees above average. But with that trough digging in the west by midweek, well, let's just see how temperatures evolve. So Wednesday's departure from normal, other than coastal or Washington, where we've got a lot of cloud cover and rainfall, it's going to be quite warm across much of the rest of the western United States, especially California. Cool axis right in through here, though. We still have some light snow pushing through this area. Now watch this. As we get into, this is now Thursday's departure from normal. So the trough is digging out here. The warmth comes out ahead of it. See that? But watch as I get you into Friday's departures. Now the temperatures start to cool from west to east. Still strong winds coming from this direction off of Montana. Very warm in the north central plains. But you're going to see on Saturday and into Sunday the cool down happening out west as the pattern adjusts. And it's not too cool. You know, we're looking at temperatures generally 5 to maybe in this part of Montana up to 10 degrees cooler than average. But it's a different pattern than what we've been seeing as of late. So to show it to you by looking at longer term, day 5 through 10 is over here. The trough is well established in this area, so the cloud cover and increased precipitation, keeping things on the cooler side right along our coast. We see that continues out to day 10 through 15. So again, the deeper trough is out here, so we'll get cloud cover and possibly some cooler weather here along the west coast of the United States. I'm not talking cold, but cooler for this time of year. Overall, though, much of the rest of the flow across the lower 48 is rather zonal, which means we're going to resist big intrusions of cold air. So that's why it's really just the trough that's off the west coast that's really controlling the temperature patterns. To finish this up, let's just look long term. This is March 10th through April 10th. We see that the models are letting that ridge back up, and they're going to continue to dive troughs into this area, which looks to keep California wetter than average through, well, hopefully the rest of March and into early April. And on top of that, because of the broader position of that trough, the likelihood of us seeing much above average temperatures for a long time period is relatively low. But this is not a cold pattern. This is nothing like the cold pattern we saw a year ago, especially in the Columbia Basin right in through here. Nothing like what we saw a year ago, just slightly cooler than average overall with this pattern. So there it is. We've now finally seen this showing up in our near-term model forecasts. And it's great to see the pattern change in a way that could salvage the end of the wet season here for California. We'll keep a close eye on it, watch how things evolve, and get you some more numbers as we work our way through this weather forecast. All right. With that, we're going to go and wrap it up right here. We'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you.